Okay, good. All right, so first up, we understand most people are fairly familiar, and perhaps some of you deeply familiar with the details and progress of the BCP so far, but certainly not everyone here. So we want to ask DEC to just start with a brief overview of the program and the status with respect to this project. And then we're going to hear from Langan with the site update and status of work that's going on, if there are no objections to that. Okay, so turn it over to DEC.
Hi, thank you. Again, I'm Heidi Dudek, and please bear with me. I'm going to try to attempt to share my screen. If I lose you all, I apologize. And oh, that didn't work. Hold on. Let me try this again. All right. And all right, can somebody confirm you actually can see my presentation? All right, awesome. So as I said, I'm Heidi Dudek. I'm the section chief that's overseeing the 250 Water Street BCP site. Today I've been asked to give you a brief overview of the BCP program. Oops, that's a go. So the BCP program is an environmental cleanup program administered by DEC to encourage voluntary cleanup of brownfield sites. Brownfield sites are pieces of property that may be difficult to reuse or redevelop because of the presence or potential presence of contamination. These sites are generally or usually former industrial or commercial sites where historic operations may have contaminated this site. And let's see if this works. So the impetus for the Brownfield Cleanup Program, and excuse me here, I'm going to have to close my thing here so I can see the screen, was decades of poor hazardous waste management. Historically, this resulted in thousands of contaminated sites across the state. These sites were potentially impacting health, environment, property values, and economic development. That's kind of where that brownfield term comes from. Legal and financial concerns can hinder cleanup of some of these sites and reuse. So as part of the Superfund and Brownfield law in 2003, the BCP program was created. It went into effect in 2006. It is the statutory replacement of the administrative volunteer cleanup program. Pretty much the goal of this program is to remediate sites, as with any of our environmental programs, to protect public health and the environment for its intended use. The way that this program is set up, it has several major components. It is to be obviously protective, to create a protective and predictable cleanup. It's use-based. I'm not going to go into these various uses. It's all available on our public website, or you can reach out to me at your leisure. There's unrestricted, restricted residential, commercial, and industrial cleanup tracks. This program sets up different ways to achieve these goals, and it also, through Part 375, established soil cleanup objectives for each of these tracks. Obviously, the DEC's preference is for permanent cleanup. What I mean by that is that we minimize any site management, so any remedies that will take several years or multiple years to complete. This program also ensures that investigations and cleanups are conducted under DEC oversight in cooperation with DOH. The whole remedial process also follows the comparable state Superfund program. You have a remedial investigation and then a remedial action. So you investigate the site, determine what's there, determine if it needs to be cleaned up, and then you come up with a remedy. At the end of the site in the program, when it's achieved all its cleanup objectives, a certificate of completion is issued to the site. This figure is available in the community participation plan for 250 Water Street, but it provides a general overview of the brownfield cleanup process. This is a program where you are entered into the program in an application, via an application. And what I've done here is on this figure, and again, I can't see you, so I don't know if I'm
Heidi,
talking too fast.
Heidi, you're doing great. Just keep
Okay,
going.
thank you. Very odd to do it this way. But what I've done is in the blue shaded boxes, these are areas where documents or applications have been put out for community review or input. And then because of the way that the 250 Water Street site has been implemented, I also show where we have solicited input from the community consultants. So the way a Brownfield program or a Brownfield site works is it enters as at the application stage. It submits an application to DEC. We review it and determine whether or not the site does indeed have contamination that would require remediation for its intended use. And the other thing we do at that time is we determine whether or not the applicant is a volunteer or a participant. A volunteer is an applicant who is not liable for the contamination at the property, while the participant is an owner and operator at the time of the disposal of the contamination, or has otherwise failed to take reasonable care to stop releases or prevent further migration of the contamination. And in order to kind of keep this succinct while I'm going through this, I'll let you know where we are with this, with the Howard Hughes Corporation and the 250 Water Street Brownfield site. Howard Hughes is a volunteer. They were not liable for the contamination at this site. The site entered into the BCP program in 2019. There are various ways that a site, or various stages within a remedial investigation or a remedial program that a BCP can enter, but I'm going to go through the way that the 250 Water Street site entered in. They entered in with enough information to allow us to determine that that there was the potential for remediation or investigation. So once they executed the Brownfield Cleanup Agreement, which is the BCA right here, they submitted to us a remedial investigation work plan. This plan outlined the sampling and analysis that would be conducted on the site to determine the nature and extent of contamination and to help assess any impacts to human health and the environment. This should also have a yellow. I apologize, I somehow deleted it. At this point in time when the work plan went through, we did solicit comments and input from the community consultants, as well as put that out for public notice. Something that we generally don't do. We did accept comments from the public on the work plan. This work plan took into account all of the comments received from all of the different entities and was approved in May of 2020. So we get to this point right here in May of 2020. Between that time and June of 2021, the remedial investigation was completed at the site. During that time, we were working in consultation with Department of Health and also soliciting input from the community called consultants Laura Dodge and Tom Cicillo. And so they were aware of the data, and I know that they were briefing the public at that point in time through the community board of what was being found and where it was going. And then when the RI is completed, the applicant submits a remedial investigation report, which brings us to this yellow box right here. Again, we solicited input from the community consultants. And the RI investigation summarizes all the data that was completed, that was collected. It presents the nature and extent of contamination and provides an assessment of impacts to public health and the environment. And that, just to make sure I have my notes correctly, was approved in June of, I was going to say this year, but we are in 2022 now, June of 2021. One of the things that happens when DEC and DOH is looking at the remedial investigation report, and is also done by the engineering firm that puts it together, is determining whether or not the site requires remediation in order to allow or if it meets the site cleanup objectives for that site for its intended use or its current use. With 250 Water Street, the RI report recommended remediation, and we concurred with that. And at that point in time, what we asked is that a remedial action work plan, which is at this point right here, be developed, which also includes an alternatives analysis. And again, I'd like just to make sure that I have my notes all here. So we approved the remedial investigation in June of 2021. Langan Engineering for Howard Hughes prepared a remedial action work plan with an alternatives analysis, which I think there's some confusion on that. An alternatives analysis looks at all the different remedial technologies. You know, it could be excavation, it could be some sort of in situ treatment, and prepares this alternative analysis in accordance with Part 375 and DER 10 and the remedy selection factors. There's 9 of them, but the 2 primary ones are protection of human health and the environment, and the remedy's ability to achieve the cleanup objectives. The remaining 7 criteria are balancing criteria to come up with the best alternative. So the remedial action work plan was submitted to the department. Again, we solicited input from the consultants for the community, and that plan was put out for public notice, and that is over here. And that generally goes out for 30 days. In this case, this had an extended comment period. And with that, when the department, while this is out for public comment, the department is starting the preparation of a decision document. And that is right here. It's part of the finalizing the remedial action work plan. The decision document memorializes what the remedial action is going to be for the site, and it could contain multiple different steps and stages. The DEC and DOH review all comments that are received from the public during that time, and we just prepare the final decision document, and then that was signed. So the decision document and the RAP for 250 Water Street were approved in November of 2021. Again, I think there's some confusion. The remedial action work plan has all the remedial elements, and it has the fundamental means and methods to implement the remedy. In this case, the remedial action work plan also requires a remedial design investigation. It needs additional information to refine the actual implementation of the remedy. There's enough information available to define the nature and extent of contamination on the site. There's enough information to determine what's the appropriate remedy and to come up with the basic means and methods to remediate the site. Some additional information was needed to better refine it and to move forward. And that's where we are now with this site. And I think that this is probably a really good time to turn it over to Langan, because they're going to explain this remedial design investigation, where it is, what they're gathering, why they are gathering it, and how that information is going to be used. And again, we'll be here to answer questions, DEC and DOH, after their presentation.
Can I interrupt just very briefly? I think Chris Marte has joined us, and I don't know how constrained his time is. And since this is our first meeting, Chris, if you want to just say hello and say a few words.
Thank you, Brian. And I want to thank Brian for organizing this working group and taking the leadership on that. I'm happy to listen and to advocate to make sure that we have the safest, most detailed process possible that takes into the concerns of all the residents, the seniors, the students, and everyone who lives and work in the parameter. So thank you again, Brian, and I'll be here for the rest of the meeting.
Great, thank you, Chris. And sorry for the interruption, but wanted to hear from our principals here. So great. Okay, so Langan.
Great, thanks very much. Give me one moment to share my screen. All right, give me one more second. Okay, so we are here, Langan is here to talk about the next phase of work for the 250 Water Street site. And that next phase is the remedial design investigation. As Heidi noted, we have completed the remedial action work plan and it's been approved by the state. And we're now in the process of generating a bit of additional data really to refine the elements, further refine the elements of the remedial action plan. So what is a remedial design investigation? Well, the remedial design investigation, as I said, it provides additional data to further inform the design and implementation of the remedial elements outlined in the approved remedial action work plan. It really helps to define the fine details, the means and methods for the work that has been approved for this site. And our remedial design investigation has several objectives, which I'll review with you here, and then I will review the specific scope of work that's included. So one of the elements of the remedial design investigation is to further evaluate vapor controls that will be used during the remedial excavation at the site. Another objective is to further evaluate excavation depths required to achieve a Track 2 remedy in the petroleum impacted area. A third is to obtain a soil data set to assist in coordinating off-site waste disposal of soil that will be excavated during the site remedy. And then a last objective is to obtain a groundwater data set for future dewatering activities. And here, this slide will outline the scope of work that we will be implementing. The first thing that we'll be doing is performing an excavation of 3 test pits in targeted locations at the site. The purpose of this investigation is for us to essentially unearth an area of soil on the site, and during that process, perform air monitoring over a 2-hour period per test pit. What we'll really be doing is evaluating whether the air monitoring that we've proposed to implement during the remedial action is sufficient during soil excavation. And at the completion of the test pits, we will be restoring the land back to the original surface condition. Another element of our proposed remedial design investigation is the waste characterization portion of the work. During that effort, we will be advancing 42 waste characterization soil borings and collecting 52 waste characterization soil samples. Additionally, in the northeastern portion of the site, where we identified elevated concentrations of PCBs in soil during the remedial investigation, we will be delineating that area of concern. We'll be advancing 7 borings to do that and collecting about 28 delineation soil samples. And again, at the completion of the work, we'll restore each boring to the original surface condition. And then lastly, we'll be collecting a groundwater sample from an existing monitoring well at the site. And the data that we get from that sample will be used to inform future dewatering, treatment, and discharge options for this site. So where are the test pits that we'll be advancing? We propose to advance 3 test pits as part of the remedial design investigation. Test pit number 1 is located in the area where during the remedial design investigation, we identified the highest concentration of mercury in soil. Test pit number 2 is located down gradient from 302 Pearl Street, which was a thermometer workshop back in the late 1800s. And test pit number 3 is located outside of the thermometer factories and workshops that were located on this site. And those are depicted in green here. They were in former row house structures. I will note that during this investigation, we will be performing the air monitoring that is proposed during the remedial action. And that includes 6 perimeter air monitoring stations, which you can see here in orange, as well as a work zone air monitor. And it's a single monitoring station that will migrate with the work area. So when test pit number 1 is finished, the excavator and the workstation will migrate to excavate test pit number 2. In addition to that, as our RAP indicates and our construction health and safety plan and community air monitoring plan, we will also have a dedicated individual that will have a handheld a PID and mercury air vapor monitor, and will be monitoring the air between the work zone and the perimeter air monitoring station. The camp that we've prepared in consultation with the Department of Health and the Department of State and Environmental Conservation is really designed with many elements of redundancy. And this figure here depicts where we will be advancing soil borings to delineate this PCB area in the northeastern portion of the site, and also where we will be advancing soil borings to characterize waste across the site for disposal purposes. Again, we will have the perimeter community air monitoring stations, as well as a work zone air monitoring station, which will migrate with the drill rig to different boring locations as we advance our work across the site. During the performance of our work, we will be implementing a construction health and safety plan that's been designed to protect on-site workers from accidents and exposures from identified contaminated media at the site. We call it a CHASP, the Construction Health and Safety Plan. It will summarize the anticipated work tasks. It will outline risks associated with those tasks and protective measures that should be implemented during the performance of the work. It also establishes key project personnel and health and safety personnel. And it includes the community air monitoring plan that will be implemented during the performance of the interim remedial measures work plan. So just to talk about the camp one more time, again, we've got 6 perimeter stations. We'll also have a weather station that will determine wind direction, and if we need to shift any location of any workstations, we will. Consistent with the camp that we implemented during the RI, if we are doing work close to the perimeter of the site, we will move a workstation across the street. And we'll also have the work zone air monitor, which will move as the work zone progresses across the site. And we will have a dedicated mobile air monitor as well, an individual that will be carrying handheld air monitoring equipment. Each of these stations, the 6 perimeter camp stations and the work zone station, essentially it's a pelican case that is located at about breathing height. And then within the case, there will be 3 instruments, one that is capable of measuring total volatile organic compounds real time, one that is capable of measuring mercury vapor, and one that is capable of measuring dust or particulates in air at the site. The perimeter stations are connected through telemetry, and the workstations have been designed so that they are instantaneously comparing the real-time data to the thresholds that have been established in the community air monitoring plan. And if there are any exceedances to that, Langan personnel are immediately notified through alarms and other means, and mitigation measures are put in place. Langan also has stop work authority in the event that elevated concentrations in air are detected by these instruments. As for the anticipated schedule for our work, the DEC has shared the draft remedial design investigation work plan with the community consultants this week. DEC has requested that the community consultants provide any feedback by January 25th, 2021. We will be implementing the RDI, the remedial design investigation, upon DEC and DOH approval. Ideally, we would like to complete the test pit program on January 29th and 30th. This is on a Saturday and Sunday. And then we would initiate the soil boring program for waste characterization and the groundwater sampling on Monday, January 31st. And we anticipate that it will take about 10 days to complete the waste characterization and groundwater sampling portion of the program. After we receive all the data back from the laboratory, we'll prepare a remedial design investigation memorandum that will summarize our investigation, the results, and the findings. And we will, throughout this process, continue our community engagement. As I think most of you are aware, Langan, at the request of Howard Hughes, has established a website for this project called 250bcp.com. It essentially acts as a repository for data that's generated as part of our investigation. It includes work plans that we've prepared that have been approved by the state, as well as daily field reports that are generated at the conclusion of each workday when we're on site investigating. And these same reports will be generated when we're on site remediating. The
Mimi,
reports.
Can I make a request that you go back to the last slide for just 1 second?
Sure.
So the soil borings will take place during the school week.
That's correct.
Okay. And this year says 2021, and I think you mean 2022.
We do. Thanks for
Okay.
that.
Yep, no problem.
Yep. So the daily reports, which include a summary of camp results, those will be posted to our website. We also will, of course, continue participating in this working group, and we will issue future fact sheets prior to and during and after the completion of the remedial action. And that is it.
Great. Okay, so next up on the agenda, we are supposed to hear from the community consultants. I would just note that it is 11:59 and we're scheduled to be convened until 12:30. So I'm going to ask I don't know how much commentary there is, but I do want to make sure we give some meaningful amount of time for questions and comments at the end. So I'm going to ask you to, move expeditiously through any comments you have at this stage. Laura or Tom?
Yes, I think I'm up first. Thank you, Mimi, for the overview. We just received the remedial design investigation work plan, as maybe indicated, on Tuesday. Tom Fusil and I had a brief conversation about it, but neither one of us have gotten into it in any detail. A few things that do jump out at us, and if Mimi could make some input, it might help us with this understanding. You have over 50 soil borings, and that's for characterization of the waste across the entire site for purposes of disposal. Just to explain to the other members on this call, the idea there is to get advance approval from the waste disposal facility so that when the remediation starts, you're able to excavate, hopefully, directly into trucks and have that material go right off site to the extent possible, so that you're minimizing stockpiling of impacted soil on site. So that's definitely something that we are in support of. And I think it's an important aspect of minimizing the potential for exposure or generation of any vapors or including organic, but also mercury vapors during excavation and management of the soil. But so 50 borings, covers pretty much the entire site, and it's designed, I would imagine, based on the volume of soil that you're proposing to excavate. But 3 test pits in comparison, given the importance of understanding the potential generation of mercury vapor when the ground is opened up during full-scale excavation, it'll be the first time pavement will have been removed completely over an area that you're proposing 5 by 5 feet square, going down 5-6 feet deep into the highly impacted areas where mercury occurs. 3 compared to the 50 borings seems not very good coverage for the site. And I'd like you to explain why you think that that's sufficient, given the fact that in the RI report, you state in several locations that mercury seems to be associated with debris. And we know from the geophysical survey done during the RI that there's debris across the entire site. Now we know the historic uses of the 4 locations, the factory and the 3 associated structures, is where the highest probability is that mercury may be found. But it's also possible that during demolition of these buildings, there was no thought to environmental issues back when these buildings were demoed. I mean, we know that they basically just probably bulldozed over what was ever there and threw it back into the excavation. And so that's one of the reasons why you're seeing subsidence in certain portions of the site where debris is shifting and you're getting, soils caving in. There's no question from the geophysical survey that there's debris and remnant foundations remaining. So if you think that mercury could be associated with debris, it would seem to make sense to do more than just 3 test pits to be sure that when you go in to do the full-scale excavation, you're not going to be surprised by finding, pockets of elemental mercury or something along those lines that you can't really see through just performance of soil borings. So I think that I'd like to hear what your rationale is for that. It might help us with our review.
Sure, the rationale is actually quite simple, Heidi. What we've done is we've designed our test pit program to, we've placed the test pits in the locations where we found the most significant mercury contamination at the site. We've also placed it in an area, the second test pit, in an area where we found moderate levels of mercury contamination in soil. And then lastly, we have placed the last test pit really in a more remote location of the site relative to where mercury contamination or where the historical operations involving mercury are located. And the rationale is if the air monitoring program is sufficient when we are excavating in the most contaminated area, then it should be sufficient as we continue to progress our operations.
Okay, so
Agreeing with
I'm going to
folks
note
who-
that that's likely,
I'm
that's
sorry.
likely not a question we're going to resolve to the full satisfaction of you.
Right.
Okay, right? So
No, understood. I'm
we'll
just going to
continue-
throw out there, though, that I think that because of the correlation with debris, it's something that I think that we need to take a look at. So
Yep.
I'll leave it at that. And, again, I appreciate the opportunity for this forum. We definitely will be providing, discussing OCB1 and providing comments. My only other comment, though, is on the timing, the schedule. If our comments go back by January 25th and the work is going to start the following weekend, it's not giving a lot of time for any dialogue if there's concerns or disagreements on the work scope. So
Right, Laura,
I'll
our
speak to CB1 about
schedule
trying
is
to get our comments before the 25th.
our proposed and ideal schedule wouldn't have the work starting the weekend of the 29th. We will not start
Right,
until we're fully
appreciate it.
approved by DEC and DOH.
All right, that's great.
that you've worked with to make
Thank you for
sure
letting us know
that.
that. And sounds good.
And
All right,
presumably you'll
give
commit
it
to.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Mimi, just to clarify, presumably you'll
Sure.
work to address any, the concerns of the community consultant or the community board before that in that period.
So Brian, when the comments are received by DEC and DOH, the agencies will digest the comments and they will respond to Langan with any direction on suggested changes to the work plan, and we will work with the state on making any amendments.
Great, thank you for that clarification. Okay, sorry, go ahead, Laura.
I think there's a delay in Laura's mic, so just wanted to note that.
And Laura, you're muted now, at least on my screen.
In the meantime, I think since Laura having some
Sorry.
obstacles here, I do want to say that, we're really happy to have this opportunity to really discuss all of these issues. And one of the main reasons why we wanted to have these test pits completed, as Mimi had said, is really to inform what the worst case scenario is when we have things opened up as far as it goes, to make sure that when we have a larger scale excavation, we really have a sufficient information to make sure that everything that's done is completely protected public health. So we absolutely welcome these discussions. We welcome the comments. We will review everything. It is certainly a, they want to get things going soon. And I think it's also important to note that the test pitting was proposed to occur on a weekend. And that's in direct response to the community also, is to ensure that some of these worst case kind of investigations that are being done are going to happen outside of school hours. So, we absolutely welcome your comments, we welcome questions, and we just want to let you know this is being heard. So this is a great forum for it, but it's also not the only time that you have a chance to have it as well. So even if there's audio, we'll work with you.
Yeah, I just,
Yeah,
is it?
It's my connection, probably my Wi-Fi. So I'm going to hand it over to Tom.
Thanks, Laura.
I would just note we have 23 minutes left and we do have questions starting with the assembly member. So if you could, sort of be relatively succinct, I want to make sure we get the other participants.
Sure. That's fine. And Laura and I, as indicated, have been in, pretty constant contact. We did have a discussion earlier today regarding, the RI or the design work plan. And we will be reviewing it. We just got it a couple of days ago. We will be reviewing it, providing comments. We concur that there may be a need for more test pits. I think we agree on that, but we can discuss that. But I overall, I would say, I appreciate this process. Laura and I have worked on a lot of brownfield sites in New York, and this is the first time this sort of opportunity has been provided for community consultants to have input into the process. I think it's been a good process. I think we've been able to be constructive in terms of the work that's done, and this is pretty unusual and appreciated. So we will provide our comments on the design work plan, and look forward to further discussions with all the parties.
So we're going to try to collate the various media by which questions are coming in. I saw in the chat first, the assembly member had a question, and then I saw Tammy, whose hand is also up, and I see Elaine. I think Elaine next, and then we'll go from there. So, assembly member.
I just wanted to follow up really quickly. One concern that I had was that the DEC approved the RAWP without using the promised test pits, which gave much more information and the full breadth of what's inside 250 Water Street. I was wondering what the reasoning was on that, and why the test pits weren't done prior to the approval.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Sorry about that. I have two mutes here. I'm not sure which one I did.
It's okay.
I can answer that. The remedial investigation work plan actually said that the test pits would be completed if it was needed in order to define the nature and extent of contamination, and to determine the best remedies. We had enough information without them to determine what the remedial element should be. We also had enough information to determine the nature and extent of contamination. And so we felt that putting the test pits in the remedial design investigation, where you can actually refine the means and methods of the remedy, was a much better place for it from an engineering standpoint. It allows them to gather the information they need to tighten their design specs so that when they have everything out in the field, it's easier to implement. And at this point, and it really, and one of the things I guess I didn't get to say is that in all the comments that we received from the public, the actual remedial elements were not questioned. Everybody agreed that excavation of the site is the most appropriate remedy. So again, the remedial action work plan follows what we believe is the most protective of human health and the environment. When you look at all the different criteria, we believe that doing the remedial design investigation now is at the best time from the design standpoint.
And just to piggyback on that too, Assembly, although we didn't need the test pits to complete the investigation, it was certainly something that we heard the community loud and clear that this is something that was wanted. And
Mhm.
we thought that the information would be good and would be important to have before the actual excavation. So even though it wasn't a requirement, it's something that we listened, we heard what you wanted, and we did what we could to make sure that it would be implemented before full-scale excavation. So you'd have that information prior to.
Also, earlier during the RAWP comment process, the DC advanced an argument that the comment period was only extended due to the request for a public meeting that was held by the community board. But the statutory language does not actually provide any support for this argument, as the statute merely mentions the right of the affected community from a Brownsville project to request this meeting prior to the close of the comment period. And I think that this is kind of concerning because the DEC appears to be choosing to alter the comment period at its discretion rather than at the request of the community actually affected by the success or failure of this project. And so I just think that furthermore, the previous comment period began during the holiday season, and the DEC provided numerous extensions beyond what they now claim is possible. And so for the RAWP, the DEC began the public comment period of it near the end of one of our toughest school years for parents and students, and prior to the CB one's only month off in the year. The DEC then basically set the end of the comment period through summer vacation and during back to school. And not only are these actions kind of, I mean, a little cold-hearted during this pandemic, but I'm wondering how the DEC is able to adjust the comment period while also claiming that the statutory requirements prevent them from doing so during one comment period, but not another comment period. It seems like the rules are changing on us all the time.
I'll take that back. I mean, that goes through somebody other than myself. So it's duly noted. And we did have a public meeting. We're having a meeting now. I at this point in time, I'm not exactly sure how you would like me to respond to that, but I'll bring it back.
No, I mean, I just hope that we would take into consideration always the community's needs. And I think that when we're giving a request for a longer comment period or for an extension on something, it's not because of anything except for our actual community needs. And sometimes it's based off of school, sometimes it's based off of the way that meetings are held, and we're trying to give like very realistic guideposts.
Understood.
Yeah.
Are you good, Member? Move on to Tammy.
Okay.
Thanks. Tammy?
Mine, I put it in the chat. I think there are many questions and comments here, and we will not get through them all today. So my point being is that all the notes and questions, specifically because this meeting is now recorded, should be collated from the chat and returned back to this working group for answers.
I agree. I agree.
And I put very clearly in a timely manner before the questions are moot. And I very specifically mean that because we would not want the borings to start before the answers are had for the school community on timing. If they need to take a look and Maggie and the Blue School and the team decide that it is an inappropriate time for them to be outside because of soil borings, they need to have an opportunity. And those kinds of things cannot be done in a school environment willy-nilly. So the amount of time and space taken, it's different for an apartment that can close a window than it is for a school moving hundreds of children in and out. So I encourage you, there were many questions that have to do with the functionality of how the schools are operating, access for coming in, going out, and how it affects air quality. So that is the most important thing to me at this point. I know that the community has faith in Laura to work with the details in Langan and give us feedback for what's not working. But the scheduling aspect is critical at this juncture.
And Emily is already
Understood.
collating those questions, and we'll try to get responses as well.
I mean, it's critical for the developer as well, because quite frankly, I don't want to have a Hail Mary phone call with Saul and Adam and his team and Mark saying, how could you have, this when we have this? So this is about partnership, and that's where I'm going.
And in addition, many of our schools have to keep their windows open due to COVID protocols. And so that should be taken into account as well.
Yep, and this is Scarlett. We've heard that, and previous comments as well, and we absolutely understand the conditions. And I have an 8-year-old in elementary school right now. I understand the difficulties with, and well, older ones as well, difficulties with having all of these students and teachers and having to communicate everything. And that's one of the reasons that, when we set action levels for camp values, they're extremely conservative. These are not something that we expect health effects at, because we want to make sure that if there's any exceedances of these very conservative levels, the actions are taken right away to address that. And that's protective right at the border of the site where these perimeter stations are. So that's something I just want to let you know. We'll certainly formulate any responses to questions, but just so the whole group can hear that is we agree. We absolutely want to make sure it's protective and understand the difficulties with arranging all of the students and staff.
Okay, so I see 5 more people who have questions. We have 13 minutes left. We might actually be able to do this in a reasonable way. Elaine Kennedy at Southbridge.
Hi, Brian, and thank you for this forum, providing this forum for us, because we definitely need to have this type of ongoing communication with the DEC and Langan and our community representatives. I'm really grateful that the test pits will be done on the weekend to protect the school. But speaking for the 5,000 residents across the street in Pearl Street, and I'll speak for the residents on Water Street and Beekman Street at this point, what protections will be provided during the test pit excavation, which we're very concerned about, to protect our community? Will the ground be covered up? Will there be any barriers provided? I'd like some specifics on what type of protections the community has, aside from the air monitoring and camp, which we understand.
Mimi, can you go through the erosion and sediment control and how you're going to be managing the test pits, please?
Sure. There's a number of steps in there's a number of provisions in the test pit program that are preventative and protective of human health, including of our site workers and of the community. So the area will be sectioned off during test pitting. There will be active dust suppression while test pitting is occurring. Any soil that is excavated will be stockpiled on poly sheeting. We'll have tarps available for use on site. We'll also have Mercon X, which is a mercury vapor suppressant on site and ready for use. And the holes will be backfilled and restored by the end of each workday. So we will not be leaving an open pit on site.
On poly sheeting means that that the soil will be contained on a very thick plastic liner type material, so that the material that can't is contained and is able to be controlled. Sorry, that was in the chat and I saw that come up, Mimi.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, and they asked about being covered. Yes, the stockpiles will be covered when not in use. That's what the tarps are for.
Right, exactly. And, in addition to these measures, Elaine, I've talked about the camp several times during my presentation. I mean, that is really what's going to protect, monitor, and lead to the protection of the community.
I have a direct question regarding the camp that I'd like to bring up then, if you were just talking about it, Mimi.
Yeah.
So specifically, sorry, I'm sorry, Brian. Can I jump off of that? Okay, yeah. Thanks. First of all, I wanted to say, I think there was a collective gasp of any of the families who have children to think that this is going to start on the 29th when the our community monitor just got it like a day ago. Also, I want to point out that in the remedial investigation work plan put out in May 2020, part of the reason why we as a community sort of signed on to this idea is that in this plan of what was going to be happening during the investigation during the summer, when the children weren't around, is that there was a test pit contingency specifically added to this investigation, and it's in the fact sheet. Then all of a sudden you've decided, after you approved this in May of 2020, that there was enough information. But then also the reason why Laura said that it didn't go through with the test pits is because we were coming back to school and it was going to be too much of a risk and it was going to cause too much noise and too much, it was an unknown. So the fact that this is going to be happening, I get that it's happening over a weekend, but then those borings, which are all over the site from edge to edge, are just as concerning. But then also I want to point out that out of abundance of caution, due to the location, the DEC and DOH are requiring that all intrusive work be performed during non-school hours. And then we just got told a minute ago that these borings are going to take place during the school time. I know it's not the test pit, but
Megan,
but I want to explain that
Hi.
we bought into the whole process with the understanding that we were going to have the data from the test pit, which then would help us understand what was ahead of us.
Okay, well,
And
there
it
was one
sounds like
thing
this
that said
stuff-
that was a contingency item, and it was a contingency item based on what information was gathered during the RI. Because that fact sheet was put out prior to the information, the data being gathered. As the data was gathered, we were working with the community consultants, Laura Dodge and Tom Facillo, and Department of Health, and it was determined at that point in time that it was not necessary to be able to move it on. The abundance
Great.
of caution of the borings and that, again, that was before all of the work had been completed. We're now to a point where we've completed a bunch of work. A lot of borings have been taken on the site. There's been many different parts of the investigation done, and Department of Health has reviewed the community air monitoring plan, has reviewed all of the data, and has determined that the camp as is presented in the remedial action work plan is protective of human health and the environment. But here's your concerns, and as we are requiring.
But I
that
challenge
test
the
pits be
idea,
completed.
I'm totally respectful, but I challenge the idea that you have an adequate idea of what is there. Here's like a big reason. If you go back and look at any of the camps over the summer and over December, you'll see that at 3 p.m., all the camps are turned off. If you look at the graphs, it is a continually growing level of VOCs and mercury. It keeps trending up and up and up. At 3 p.m. or 5 p.m., whenever the site is shut down, you turn off the monitor. We don't have that data. What if it continued on? So my point is, when this new set comes up, the camps should be 24 hours, or they should stay on until there is a acknowledged tapering off of the mercury and the VOCs. It literally, go look at the reports, up, 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 turned off. So I don't see how the DEC and the DOH thinks that they have an adequate representation of what happens when our kids don't leave the site, and when the Southbridge residents don't leave the site, and when the folks who live on Pearl and Water are there 24/7. So my mouth is dry and my heart is racing, thinking that this is going to start on the 29th, when there are quite a few unknowns that I don't think have been addressed. And I thought this was our opportunity to talk about it. I'm surprised that this is on the list to start in 2 weeks' time.
Well, actually, I have to say, and again, I need to clarify this. The schedule that was put out there is the site's wish. At this point in time, we haven't given any kind of timeline. What I have done, it's not a very long work plan. It references back a lot of plans that the community consultants have already reviewed as far as the camp and that. So the only deadline right now is that we get the comments from the consultants within 2 weeks. The start time, we haven't given Langan Engineering any approvals. We haven't given them any timeline to begin the test pitting program or the waste characterization sampling. So again, I understand your concern. I hear you. Part of the reason is that at 3 o'clock, and I can confirm this with Mimi and that, but once work is complete and everything is closed up, you turn off your camps, because then you're not monitoring what is actually coming from the site. You're monitoring ambient air conditions that are coming from all over in the city.
That's not true. If you look at the thing, it's going up and up and up and up. Before you start the work, it's at a zero, it's here. And then as the work proceeds during the day, it keeps going up and up. So I'm not saying, I think that's a complete miscategorization of what you're monitoring. The vapor doesn't disappear the second that the camp turns off. And that was my follow-up question. When you have the borings, are they capped immediately, or are they capped at the end of the day? Or is each individual one capped? This is my question.
I can
Sorry,
take that
you're-
one. Each,
Go ahead.
yeah, we at the completion of each boring, it's filled in and capped.
Sorry, I just think I shared my screen with you guys, but Megan, I can piggyback on what you're saying. If you guys look at the data from the daily air monitoring reports from MLCOT on, for example, July 29th, 2020, the data for the mercury vapor, and I have a screenshot if I can share it, but you can see the data continues to rise. So some of the data in those reports were misleading. It shows the mercury as being 000 on the data tables up above. But if you look at the graph at the bottom of the report, you can see mercury levels are sustained and increasing throughout the entire day. And around, I think on that day, it's like 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, whenever they turn off the camp stations, that's the highest level of mercury for the entire day. And so what Megan's saying is we don't have that data. I think one of the things we were going to ask for is to see if we could have monitoring at the site for 24 hours a day.
So if I can interrupt here, just because we have several more, I think this issue has now been well aired, and I think there's a real clear question on the table about when those are going to get turned off and why, and whether that period can be extended. So if I may, could we table this question and ask Langan and DEC to get back to us with a more thorough answer and whether that request can be honored going forward, unless you have a very quick answer now, because I do want to make sure that the other folks that have an issue to raise get to raise it. Does that work?
Yeah, we'll get back. I think that's
Okay, good.
I think that would be the easiest to allow
great.
more questions.
Yeah, I have Maggie, Sienna, and Warren Green still to go. And Elaine, I don't know if your hand is still up from before. If you asked your question, you don't have another one, you can take it. That'd be helpful. Same. Great. Okay, so Maggie, Sienna.
Just quickly, what I put in the chat, my questions in the chat really have to do with the availability of PEC slip between Pearl and Water, which we use for arrival, dismissal, and recess. And I'm looking at the area, I'm looking at the streets, and I'm trying to visualize whether that is going to be safe and available during the school day, how trucks are going to be going in and out, where trucks are going to be staged. So I'm just looking for some answers on the availability of PEC slip between Pearl and Water way prior to anything happening.
Understood. I believe, Mimi, you have a truck traffic plan where you've determined your entrances and egresses from the site. And
Yeah.
I believe that we're not anticipating any staging of trucks anywhere near the site, that everything is going to be going off and then coming on and then loading and going back off.
And Maggie, just to reiterate that, we fully and totally understand and appreciate the importance of that area for the children and the play area. And we reiterated it to Langan and to everyone. And if for some reason something does come up that requires it, we will give you plenty of advance notice, but we support the playground area and we will make sure that we do everything we can to minimize it. And if we have to give you as much notice as possible.
Thank you.
Great. Next, Warren Green.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. My question is, there may be, you're going to monitor the vapor. This is what I'm understanding. Maybe I'm wrong. Please correct me. You're monitoring the vapors that will be coming out of the borings. How does it, are they going to be stopped from coming into the residential community and the schools? That's my real concern, because I actually live on Pearl Street.
Well, what's happening is they're monitoring and I don't know if I put myself accidentally on mute, is that they're monitoring at the borings, but they're also monitoring on the site perimeters. And there are concentrations that are set well below any kind of, it's a threshold criteria before there would be any effect to the public health. And when those are approached, there are alarms that go off, everybody shuts down. And as it's been stated, tarps can be put over things in order to prevent vapors. And then there's also Merconex if it was a mercury exceedance that would be there, or dust suppression in order if it was a particulate exceedance at the border. But those, and DOH can provide better explanation, but the camp monitors that are on the site are monitoring what's leaving the site, and those are set at levels well below where there would be any issues for the general public.
Wouldn't it be better to have the tarps up so we prevent anything coming into the community? I don't care if it's 0.00001. I don't want any of it. I'm going to end up breathing it if I'm home and my windows are open.
Well, that's one of the reasons actually to conduct a lot of this during the colder winter season, because mercury is not going to volatilize anywhere near as readily in the winter as it does in the summer when temperatures are higher. So that's an additional protective measure there as well. There's a certain amount of mercury that is in the air in an urban setting as well. So we're cognizant of that, and we want to do everything that we can to minimize any mercury that's leaving the site. That's why we actually have camp stations and air monitoring stations in the actual area where they're going to be doing any sort of work. One that's going to be roaming, a drone that's going to be roaming around the site as well, in between the perimeter monitoring stations, as well as the perimeter monitoring stations. It's really, there's a lot of measures of protection that are worked in there so that actions can be implemented immediately if there are any exceedances of these extremely conservative
What is the difficulty in putting up a tarp to contain whatever might come out anyway? I don't see how that becomes a major problem. Why take that risk? Why take any risk if you don't have to? Is it so difficult to put a tarp up that you already have?
The tarps will be, if there's any issues with the stockpiles, there will be a tarp that's going.
I'm not talking about stockpiles. I'm doing as you do the borings. As you do the borings, you're going to be taking the soil sample, right? Why should anything that's in that soil have the opportunity to go into the general New York City community?
Yep. I mean, I understand what you're saying, that,
Maybe I'm using the wrong term. Maybe it should be tenting instead.
Yeah, I think that's what you're asking for. I misunderstood.
What's wrong with that?
Okay,
what is wrong with that?
Warren, I appreciate you. So I think, again, this is now a very clearly stated question. I don't know if there's a full answer that's available right now, but can we add this as something we want specific follow-up, explain
Well, I think, Mimi, don't you have a brief answer that can explain? Because we've talked about it. I don't know if now's the time or not, but I think there is an answer to it.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just really briefly. I mean, the point of I think we're also conflating a couple of things here. Our remedial design investigation has two parts to it. One is a test pit study, and that test pit study is being used to inform whether our proposed community air monitoring plan that we'll implement during the remedial action is adequate and effective. And if we were to put a tent up, effectively, it creates an artificial environment that is not representative of atmospheric conditions. Therefore, it completely eliminates our ability to prove out the hypothesis and objective of the testing program in the first place, which is to see whether during soil excavation, the planned community air monitoring is appropriate. During the second part of our remedial design investigation includes advancing a number of soil borings across the site, as well as collecting a groundwater sample. We have already done this as part of the remedial investigation. We've already advanced a number of soil borings and collected groundwater around the site, and we have had no exceedances of community air monitoring thresholds that were determined to be based on actual site conditions. So there really is, at this point in time, the data does not indicate that there is a need for any additional measures.
Okay, so I'm gonna hold that off. In our future meetings, we'll have fewer introductions and preliminaries, but we are at 6 minutes past time here. And I do want to respect the 43 people who are on this call. Grace Lee has, I think, let's call this the last question.
I just wanted, I think we put it in the comments, but I also wanted to make it clear that we are asking Heidi to come down to the site and the DOH as well, to do a walk with our community before any additional work is done. Okay, I think that's a very reasonable question, a very reasonable, ask of the DEC to do this. I don't understand how you can regulate and understand how complex the situation is without seeing how we are using this, we are using the streets and how the schools are integrated into the streets next to the school, next to the
I see a thumbs up from our council member.
So that needs to happen. We need a promise today that you will do that. You're on mute, Heidi.
Sorry. Now I understand why nobody heard me. I actually visited the site in November during the day and observed as the school was coming in and out. So I have seen it. I understand your schools. I understand the streets are barricaded in order to allow the areas right in front of them to be used for PE classes or recess, or depending on, I guess, the age group. So I have seen the site. I understand the site. I understand the volume of traffic on Pearl Street. I understand the width of the streets on the other three sites. But we will also be going back down either in probably now early February. And at that time, we will let everybody know. But I have been to the site, as has the project manager and DOH.
Yep, we've been there. In
Okay,
fact,
we'd like to make sure that you meet us meet community members while you do that, because the work
Maybe
was
we
being
can
done
convene.
when
Maybe
school
we
was
can
not
convene
on.
an on-site
Thank
version
you.
of this. Maybe we can convene
As
an
long as safe
That would be great.
protocols and
Trying to visit
protocols
it.
can be taken care of, I understand
Great,
that.
we
just
love
make
safe
sure that we.
protocols for our children too.
All right. Well, so all right. With that, I think I see a couple other thumbs up for that idea too. So, all right. So with that, I'm gonna, move to adjourn this meeting. Thank you all. It's been we're 99 minutes in. I think it's been a good, enlightening and productive conversation. We obviously have some questions we need follow up on. To Tammy's point earlier, we'll try to make sure that the timeliness of the questions raised is reflected in the timeliness of the answers. And we did record, we've also recorded the video, and we will post it on our official Senate site as soon as we can. So if people want to link to that, obviously we'll also share the recording if you all have places you'd like to post it. And I think that's it, unless anybody has any concluding comments before we adjourn.
Thank you very much for organizing the meeting. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everybody. Thanks.